Welcome everyone. We'll just wait for a few other people to sit down, but yeah, awesome to have you all here. I know there's a lot on at the moment, so good school holidays, good weather. So yeah, appreciate everyone coming, and also quite a short timeline to turn this event around, where we sort of got notice that Philip was keen to come to Perth about a week and a half ago, so great to turn this around so quickly because it is a big opportunity for Perth. Cool, so yeah, everyone please feel free to grab a seat. So my name is Brodie McCulloch. I'm Managing Director of Space Cubed. But just before I start, I just wanted to acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation and pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. And you know, we're heading into a really significant few weeks coming up in Australia, so just want people to really engage with that process. It's great to have you all here. We've had a lot happen around how do we support the ecosystem over the last probably 3 months. So many of you at the MIT REAP event. We've had 50 people at GEC last week. I might just grab my clicker, Nate. Oh, there, cool. It's next to the microphones. Thank you, Nate. And there's a lot going on. So this is a really good opportunity to reinforce a lot of that. And what we're really focusing on is how do we level up the whole ecosystem to support more entrepreneurs, innovators and change makers. Big shout out to there's a number of, so Adam and Lane are here from Lottery West, so eating, sorry guys, who have really supported the Meshpoints project and the End of Society initiative, which has been up and running just over 12 months now and has really grown massively. So I'll just give a bit of a brief on Meshpoints and what we're doing with the End of Society initiative and the progress to date. But it has been a really big 12 months. Many of you were at the Meshpoints Congress we had probably a month ago, almost exactly, which was a great event to bring together about 130 odd ecosystem leaders to work on what we can do with the ecosystem next. And the whole point of this project is around how do we build a culture of innovation entrepreneurship in Western Australia. That culture, I think you all being here means that already exists, but how do we level that culture up? So it really consists of 3 things. So we've got Meshpoints, which is using a model that we sort of borrowed from the Canadian Centre for Social Innovation around how to organise grassroots communities and organisations to have a collective impact. So now we have over, I think it's 19 sub-constellations. We've got our stewards group in place, which many of you know, and we've got a whole range of people and organisations working towards, you know, whether it's female founders, how to support them better, a whole range of different areas. So that's all come together in the last 12 months, and there was about 30 odd projects that came out of the Congress a few weeks ago that now we're looking at, well, how do we move those forward? We've got the index, which I'll talk a bit about in a second, and also we've got the fund. So all of these 3 things work together, where we have new projects coming through the community. We can then fund those projects to support more entrepreneurs, and we can measure the impact of that with the index. So that's how we've set this up, and it's already having a, you know, we've got the first report, and it's having a great impact already. So from the Meshpoints perspective, it's really around how do we organise all of the different organisations and people that are working in this space to work collectively on the impact that they're wanting to have. So we've got over 100 partner organisations now. I think we've got that here, that are working in the space, really diverse from VCs, philanthropists, government, corporate, ecosystem builders, entrepreneurs themselves, so a whole range of different organisations that have sort of said, we want to work together on a specific area to support this ecosystem. Universities, so a number of universities here today, and it's great that that's all come together in the last 12 months. I mentioned GEC, so for those of you who got over GEC, we had almost 50 people head over and had scholarships from JETSI, Meshpoints and Startup WA, which was great, where we had a mix of entrepreneurs and ecosystem builders, government there, to look at, well, what's happening globally and how can we apply that back to Perth. There was about 2,500, 3,000 people that went along to that, and we'll do a bit of a feedback session as part of the scholarships. Participants needed to provide feedback to the ecosystem on, you know, what they learnt and how that could be applied. So that'll all come out over the coming months. So over the last 12 months, we've had almost $1.2 million deployed into 87 ideas through Idea Starter, and then 28 projects, which a number of you have been involved in. I'll steal a little bit from Morning Startup, where if there's anyone who wants to talk, just 30-second grab on your project, let's just do a couple of minutes now where you can share, because that's one of the key things is people knowing what's happening across the ecosystem. So yeah, if there's anyone who wanted to share what they're working on, it doesn't have to be through this either, just what they're working on in the ecosystem. We'll just spend 4 minutes doing that. So Anyone? Yep. Just the intro and yeah.
Nicely led. Morning, my name's Chloe. I work for Venture. So Venture's a UWA run or UWA Student Guild led project, along with my colleagues Josh, our entrepreneur in residence, and Helena and Ethan, who are student led committee. Venture primarily exists to do two things. The first thing is to create opportunities to innovate within industry, and the second one is to grow student led startups. So thanks very much to Lottery West, to Meshpoints, to Space Cubed. We've been able to run our second year of our incubator this year. We've got 14 teams coming through, creating everything from solar-powered, seawater hydro storage solutions to plastic bricks to caffeinated kombucha. These guys are going to be pitching on the 14th of November to a really exclusive group of people. If anyone wants to find out any more about what we do, please come and give me a shout.
Thank you. Hello everyone, I'm Wongi, or Michelle, if you want to be formal. Huge shout out, thank you Lottery West and Space Cubed. We received funding for the Great Southern Hackathon, amazing event that ran in the Peel region. We had 700 youth filling the Mantle Performing Arts Centre and it absolutely rocked. The remit was that we would shine a spotlight through disruption on the youth of Peel to bring out their talents, which are very underserved due to low socio-demographics and also lack of role models or industry in the region where they're not seeing the opportunities right in front of them. So the presenters were given the task of, not telling us about their 90% ATAR and computer science degree, but instead about how the multitude of pathways through innovation and technology. And that led into day two, a hackathon event where we removed any advantage of coaching and private school, for example, advantages. So they came in and they got a kit at the start with a comic book and they all started on a level playing field. We filled full entries for the secondary and the primary category with government schools taking out all the prizes, which was amazing. So it really had the outcome we were looking for. And we've received so much funding and support that we're now able to provide the top 4 secondary teams. They're having tables at West Tech Fest. We're putting them up in the Pan Pacific for the night, so they're having a 5-star. To these kids, it's unbelievable. They can't believe how the opportunity. And yeah, I'm working with Megan. We're going to get them all there on the bus. So yeah, it's going to be really fun. And the flow-on effects have been incredible. I've got 2 other regions already reached out. So the event next year will be running hopefully across at least 3 regions. So very exciting. Thank you. And then I'm going to steal another 30 seconds. Sorry. Because, Brodie will learn to never give me the microphone again. I've actually just been appointed 2 weeks into the role of heading up the innovation and operations at the WA Creative Technology Hub. So there's a lot of there's 4 innovation hubs linked to the universities, and I'm sure some of you here are connected and I look forward to meeting you because I haven't had a chance yet. But yeah, so that role I will be certainly working on helping support innovation, entrepreneurship in that space too. So very excited. So I look forward to meeting you all. Thank you.
Anyone else? Oh, Megan. Okay, you're kind of in the middle. Yeah.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Megan Enders. I'm from Education Philanthropy Fogarty Foundation, and we're always interested in trying to build future skills in all sort of shapes and sizes. And we started at least a good decade ago bringing coding clubs to WA through Coder Dojo, which we now do in partnership with Curtin University, which is quite amazing, and it's had a spin-off into the autism space, which is exciting. We're a Meshpoints partner and we're part of the education sub-constellation because we want to stay really close to what's going on and keep the radar on for some good initiatives and things we can help support and perhaps scale in the system. And as part of that, Elizabeth Knight from Purposeful's been able to win some funding for one of her projects, and we're an in-kind partner with her on that, where she's been looking at entrepreneurship studies and opportunities for children across the regions of Western Australia. So she's done a survey of school students, she's done interviews with school teachers and educators in this space, and then also ran a small sort of taster workshop down in Bustleton a couple of weeks ago, which I was delighted to go along to and see in action. So hopefully her report on that will be done soon, and we will be presenting that into the education sub-constellation population conversation, and more widely if necessary, just to find things we can try and do to support the regions. And as Michelle has mentioned, we're really excited in particular about partnering with Curtin and lovely Danelle's here today to do West Tech Fest education program for the first time. And so Jeremy Chetty, Student Edge, is working with us on that. He's developed the showcase for the young entrepreneurs to showcase what they're up to. That first one was held last year. It was a huge success, and we felt we've got to do much more here. And so we're now sort of wrapping around that information sort of exploratory sessions for young people, hoping to have about 20, 30 different high schools represented, including a good chunk coming up from Mandurah in the Peel region. And then we've already had so much interest in it that we're sort of looking at maybe a couple of days' worth of programs for next year, and we particularly want to get into the regions and do things in the regions as well. And so if anybody's working in these spaces, particularly in regions, love to get to know you more and understand some of the challenges and issues and perhaps ways we can help to tackle those. So thank you.
Awesome, thanks Megan. I should say we've got about 15 odd people joining online because it was a short turnaround, so thanks everyone for joining online. Probably just last one, anyone else want to? Yeah.
It's a good segue into the regional conversation. So I'm Kate, I'm from Core Innovation Hub, but we're an ecosystem specifically for resources, mining and energy. We have a hub here in WA in Perth and also in Newman, and we also have a hub in Adelaide. I specifically wanted to mention that we're running at the end of October our Pilbara Innovation Exchange. So we're bringing almost 20 companies down from the Pilbara region across a variety of areas, Port Hedland, Karratha, Newman, to come down to Bentley Tech Park for an afternoon of education around demystifying net zero for their companies, a small business toolkit. But as part of that, they'll also be pitching their businesses to the attendees of the event, and they'll also have the opportunity for networking with the attendees as well. So if you're interested in heading along to the Pilbara Innovation Exchange, jump on Humanitics so you can book a ticket. If you've got any other questions around that, then let me know, but we'll be running that on the 27th of October. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. And also, if anyone's got any other things to share, we've got the Circle platform that you can share through, so just put stories up there. So just quickly also, we launched the Innovation and Ecosystem report at the Congress. You can now access the index online as well. So have a chat with Nate if you'd like to do that, or should send us through an email. And also, if anyone's interested in it or not a partner in Meshpoints already, feel free to talk to myself, Nate, Olivia, or Lauren, or any of the stewards as well. So we've got a few here, Kylie, Danelle, I think that's everyone here. So yeah, there's lots of opportunities to get involved, but I will speed up. Yeah, there's the index. Sorry, Nate. It looks really good. Got to keep going, get back on time. So much work done. But you could go online and use it yourselves. You don't need me to run you through it. Yeah, so great to have Philip here. Yesterday we went and met with Jetsy. We just saw an opportunity with him over in Australia for GEC to get him over Western Australia and talk about what we're doing here, but also get his feedback on what's happening from both a Meshpoints perspective, but also across the broader ecosystem. So yesterday we met with Jetsy, so Linda Dawson and a number of the staff there. Meeting with the Minister at lunchtime today, and then we've got a range of philanthropists, and Philip will be able to talk about his background at Kauffman Foundation. But philanthropists and philanthropy's role in supporting entrepreneurs is something that's probably not as prevalent in Australia. So it is an opportunity to talk to philanthropists about, well, what can philanthropy's role be to support entrepreneurs and innovation at probably an earlier stage in the ecosystem, and potentially later stage as well, from using the capital that they have available to leverage that for additional dollars. So I'll hand over to Philip to introduce himself, and then we'll do a quick. He'll run through some of the content he went through at GEC, which we thought was valuable to everyone, and then we'll just do Q&A as well. We don't have a fireside here, so we've got a lot of wood though. Yeah, that will. Yeah, we can do that. We've got tools there, but yeah, great. So thank you, Philip.
I come with props. So here we go. Yeah, there we go. Unless my head's going to be in the way. So.
Did you want quick?
Oh yeah, there we go. How's that? Everyone see? Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for bringing the energy. There's energy in the room. Love that. Anytime we're talking about entrepreneurship, that happens. If there's not energy in the room with entrepreneurship, we're doing something wrong. So that's who I am. That previous slides. I'm Philip. I've been with the Kauffman Foundation since late 2016, and Brody just talked about philanthropy and what can philanthropy do to help entrepreneurs, and our whole strategy is really based on that. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to run through what some of the initial data that drove us to doing the strategy that we're doing and the work that we're doing. But first, I'll start with just a little bit about myself. So that's a thing to just completely have you go, what on earth are you showing, Philip? The pixelation isn't good. But as it relates to ecosystems and entrepreneurial ecosystems, one of my first jobs was in an airport. And if you ever fly on any airline, especially Delta Airlines, I used to work for Delta Airlines in the US, and you see that person walking around in a red jacket with a walkie-talkie, and I don't know why they make the jackets red, because it incites anger, that color, and people yell at you a lot. But my job was, on a daily basis, at Los Angeles International Airport, Terminal 5, 3,000 unique passengers a day, of making sure that airport ecosystem for passengers was as connected as possible. At the time, I didn't know I was learning something. But what I was learning was that how people go from point to point, and how any ecosystem can go from being highly connected to disconnected within 30 minutes because the jetway breaks or the weather changes or someone falls down in the terminal or whatever happens. And the same thing is relevant as it relates to ecosystems and entrepreneurial ecosystems. People say, well, what is an entrepreneurial ecosystem? And I say, and you can call it an environment, a community, whatever it is, but it is about resources getting from those who have it to those who need it in the fastest amount of time and the least amount of friction. I didn't make that up. A number of people use that. But that's really what it is. And so I thought we would cover today, I'll go through quickly, why entrepreneurial ecosystems, why we're doing this work. What do I have the second one? Oh, some design principles. Okay. So back in 2017, we did research that said there are 3 big megatrends in the United States that are shaping entrepreneurship. And that if the nation doesn't do something about these megatrends, our economy isn't really going to survive or sustain. So the first one, it's like, oh my God, new demographics of entrepreneurship. So the new demographics, or that people in the United States are just, the demographics are changing. Where people are living is changing. That leads into the new map. People are moving from cities in the Northeast to the Southwest. How does an election in Georgia, a state like Georgia, and a presidential or other election go suddenly to a different party after a lot of years? People are moving, right? So there's the new demographics, the new map, and then the new nature of just that big businesses are no longer being able to carry job creation enough on their own, and to wide disparities in that. And so we looked at it and said, well, how can philanthropy play in creating a new model of entrepreneurship? We called it a new model of economic development to help entrepreneurs start and grow businesses. And it's through the science of ecosystems. I'm going to stand up because I'm going to look at these. A little bit more on the data. So the data was showing us that traditional methods of encouraging entrepreneurship just weren't producing desired results. And what I mean by that is this, and this is still a stat that's live today in the United States. This was from our research a few years back. But startups are just flatlining. They're just not, we had a little bit of a blip after COVID. But if this is the case, if big businesses aren't creating the jobs that they need to, and not enough entrepreneurs are starting businesses, we're going to have a job problem in the United States. And the research found that it's exacerbated by people of certain populations. So, people in rural environments, people from different ethnic backgrounds, much more disparity in starting businesses and growing businesses than others. And so ecosystem building, we believed, is something that it's an emerging and needed model. So what we did was bring together, we started out and said, we've heard of ecosystem builders, why don't we bring them all together and just talk? So we brought 450 of them together in Kansas City from across the nation and from 10 countries around the world to have a first of 4 entrepreneurship summits. We call them eShip summits. And it was about people coming together and going through design thinking together to come up with what is ecosystem building and how does it become professionalized so that communities have leaders that are glue points in them to help their communities become more connected. So I'm gonna tell a story here. So sort of our thesis behind this all. So let's, I give her a different name in every presentation. So I'm gonna go, this is Julie. So Julie's in her ecosystem. She's an aspiring entrepreneur. She got a fantastic idea. And she doesn't really know what to do. She doesn't know who to go to. She needs to go to different people to find, where do I get capital? Where do I get resources? Where do I get information? All of that, right? There's tons of people out there that can help her. But her job is to find all the people on her own in the right order in order to be successful, right? Our job as ecosystem builders and communities is to connect those resources first and have roadmaps for Julie before she even shows up, right? When we do that, we have created a more dense network. Now, some of these networks are more helpful than others. How many people say, I want to be just like Silicon Valley? Well, no, maybe not. Highly dense connected, but highly exclusive and hard to break into, right? So this is what we call a new model. On the left are things that are more traditional. Make sense, they're good, right? Don't stop those. What's needed more is the communitization aspect of it, the social capital aspect of it. That's the work that you're all doing, right? Peer learning, diversity and inclusion. And I'm going to go through now from our playbook the 7 design principles that we set. So all those ecosystem builders came together, came up with these design principles that we wanted to test out to see, hey, do they work, right? So we created a playbook. It's kauffman.org/playbook. These are online. And there's 7 of them. And I'm going to go through them one by one. And I'm happy to stop for questions as we go along, too, because I can go in so many different directions. But the first, put entrepreneurs front and center. How many people have had a meeting about entrepreneurship and there hasn't been one entrepreneur in the room? I always get a laugh at it. It's true, it happens, it's natural, right? Passionate people about entrepreneurship, but make sure everything about the ecosystem is entrepreneurship centric, with listening to entrepreneurs first, even before your own passion, because if we're not listening enough, we won't know exactly what to do, right? Fostering conversations. One of the things that we had to learn as Kauffman was, about 12 years ago, we had entrepreneurs in Kansas City come to us and say, we need a place to talk as entrepreneurs. You're the foundation of entrepreneurship. You're not even having any sessions here, so how about you have us in so we can all meet each other? So on a Wednesday morning 12 years ago, we brought them all in, and that concept has now turned into a 12-year program called 1 Million Cups, which is in 130 cities now, that every Wednesday morning, 2 entrepreneurs get up in front of an audience of their peers It's not a pitch session, but it's the entrepreneur talking about where they are in their work, in their business, and who can help them. It's the number one, and then the word millioncups.com. Fostering conversation, just talking to people, is very, very important. Everyone's invited. One thing I like to say is, who is not in the room? Always ask yourself that question. I'm having a meeting, I'm doing a co-working space, I'm doing an initiative. Who's not here that needs to be? Because the people that may need to be may be fearful, may be put off by the words innovation, entrepreneurship, may think it's only for certain people, right? And if you want to serve communities, how do you do it, right, if not everyone's in the room? Live the values. All right, this is a big one. The group came up with these, and if you're living these values while you're doing your work, it's hard to make a mistake. One of the hardest ones is this. I haven't experienced this as much of an issue since I've been here in Australia. In the US, it's a big issue because so many people that have been doing community work for a long time, and there's some type of energy there where they work against each other. But again, all this is online first. Feel free to take a picture or what have you, but just different things of making sure to do in effective entrepreneurial ecosystem building. Bottom up, top down, everybody's included. Be authentic to your community. I go back to Silicon Valley here. Don't try to be another community. Don't. Maybe learn best practices, but what are your own values that you have in your own community, in your own cities, that you can build from? And then that is really key. It's hard work. It's hard. It's twists and turns and everything else. And so, there they are, all together. What we said was, okay, this is a thesis. We think this. What do we think? How does all of it work? What we did was go test that out, and we went and tested it out in 4 cities, and on the ground to say, over 3 years, following these principles, can an effective entrepreneurial ecosystem actually build, and can it thrive? So we partnered with an organization called Forward Cities, a grantee, that we granted to go test this out in Kansas City, Baltimore, Maryland, Long Beach, California, and Central New Mexico. 4 highly different economic indicators, 4 different climates, 4 different everything. So that after 3 years, we could print out a roadmap or an evaluation study which says, here are 4 different types of ways or different cities that did this and hopefully be successful. We gave them funding for 3 years and said at the end of 3 years, our money will stop. So the goal that you have in this 3 years is to create something self-sustaining, including your own funding models, right? One of the problems that philanthropy has had and done is going in with something with money and then just leaving, say, okay, we're out, we're gonna go do something else, and you leave a community stranded because you didn't have those conversations to start with. I'm gonna show a quick video here, and then we'll go into Q&A.
There's enough room for entrepreneurs, and this is the future.
An entrepreneurial ecosystem builder is a community organizer for entrepreneurs.
Is a connector. It helps individuals, organizations, and community get connected.
It's about identifying where barriers exist, even unspoken barriers, where things have been just insurmountable, basically, for folks to access resources that do exist in our region.
It's someone who is willing to sit down and have a lot of individual conversations to understand what's happening and to connect and to put things together, right? Both within this individual level, right? Like an individual entrepreneurial level, but also what's happening at the system.
They really have a systems view of things. They're looking at the context to understand the systems that are keeping what's around in place. And so we're really trying to build a new system.
There are so many pockets of our city where entrepreneurial ideas are starting, but not all get the same recognition.
You have population centers, and then you have rural areas surrounding those centers. And if they're not connected, then the flow of resources doesn't really exist necessarily to the people that it needs to reach.
It's something like 85% use their own funds to be able to get their business started. Automatically sets the limit as to what type of businesses and what type of industries that communities of color get into. And so how do we help change that?
You can't really divorce the challenges that we're facing now from the historic challenges of slavery, Jim Crow, the northern migration. How do we shift the conditions that are marginalizing some folks and over-resourcing other folks in order to reorient it so that everybody has access to sustainable community development? Even though we may struggle with similar issues, every community is different and we all need to be able to generate our own solutions.
Fundamental to the mission of eShip Communities is targeting historically underrepresented entrepreneurs and business leaders. You know, what neighborhoods are being left out of our city? Who all in community are being a part of talking about these discussions?
In Baltimore, we're really trying to create a whole new context so that Black entrepreneurs can access everything that white entrepreneurs do, but we're doing it in a way that's culturally anchored and really connected to the way Black people work together.
The neighborhoods that we're working in don't feel supported, and so how do we help these individuals feel that there is a culture and atmosphere in Kansas City where entrepreneurs feel supported and that there's bringing resources really back to those communities?
I think a lot of those barriers can be addressed through cooperative approaches, but that level of organization has yet to be created.
We're trying out some ideas we think might work, and we're saying, what's the chance someone in another town, city, municipality takes everything we learn and paints a picture of how to tailor it for your specific community?
So going back to those, where I started, those mega trends and the data that we saw in the U.S., the stark nature of the gaps for all entrepreneurs. I mean, 83% of entrepreneurs do not access traditional capital at the time of starting a business, either traditional capital or venture capital in the United States. 83%. So that's a wide range. That's all entrepreneurs. It's just not certain demographics. But when you start doing the crosstabs in that data, women and people in rural environments and people of color just have the biggest challenges. And so that's from a philanthropic perspective of looking at, I say, how does philanthropy help? And help is thinking of ourselves as a different type of economic actor, not just more of a passive, comfortable organization that's doing grant making that takes longer cycles, is digging in and trying to really, really solve problems. Mr. Kauffman was a humanitarian, Ewing Marion Kauffman. He wanted people to flourish, humans to flourish. He didn't have the luxury of a good education, but he got lucky, right? Taking $5,000 into his basement that he took from being a pharmaceutical sales guy and started his own pharmaceutical company in his basement, named after his middle name, Marion Laboratories, to make it sound like he was more than one person, he was only himself. 20 plus years later, you know, you're selling that to Merrill Dow and you're taking the 700 million of the proceeds there and starting a foundation. When you started on the premise of everyone has a fundamental right to an education and to economic independence through enterprise, entrepreneurship. So that's why we focus on those two things. So we always have to go back to our roots and understanding it's about helping people that don't have a chance, right? contemporarily now, it is also about, I believe, how does philanthropy, as I say, play different economically and cross-sectorally in cities to really be part of solutions. So I'm going to stop there, and I didn't know that came up. Sorry. And I'm happy to talk more about E-ship communities or anything else, or any question you're going to throw at me. There we go.
Great. No, thank you so much, Philip.
Yep.
So yeah, we've got about 20 minutes or so for questions. So if anyone's got any questions, let me know. I'll kick off. So you've been in Australia for a couple of weeks now, week and a half, or 2 weeks. So what have you seen that, I think you mentioned one of the differences you've seen, but what have you seen as some of the differences from the sort of US context, but also probably the opportunity you've seen? You've only been in West Australia for 48 hours, so maybe take it Australia as a whole.
As a whole, what I don't see are those stark data points that are driving urgency that we have in the US, right? And so the creation of the urgency to get support to build entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial endeavors is different without those type of drivers. So I think it's how to create that vision of the future for folks, to bring them along, as if to say, oh, now I get why what you're doing is so important. But it's just not localized to Australia. It's in different regions of the world. We still have that in the US. It could be convincing stakeholders, it could be convincing other funders to understand the urgency of now, and if we do act now, what changes for people in their lives later. So that's one. What I absolutely will have an applaud you for here is the work that you're doing so far is tremendous. It's tremendous in the ecosystems work and the mapping work that you've done. You're on the right path, and you're in such an advantageous moment globally doing this work based on where Australia is at this point in time, and especially in Western Australia, the resources that you have, the history that you have, and understanding how to go about that with such a wide geographic area, make that work. It may not, and I say this to every community, it may not seem that you're succeeding as much as you are because you're in it every day, but you are. It's fantastic work that you're doing.
Any questions? Oh, Derek.
Thanks, Roddy. Derek Gerard from Purpose Ventures. Hi, Philip. Thanks for coming to Perth.
Yep.
I had two questions. One was, and I'll just caveat this by saying I'm a massive supporter of ecosystem building. But I guess one thing I don't think gets talked about a bit is, at the end of the day, entrepreneurs are competitive by nature. Mm-hmm. And if you're starting something that's contributing to the ecosystem, let's say you create an accelerator, then the next accelerator comes along and there's potentially competition, or I'm an angel investor network, and then the next angel investor network comes along, and so as you build, you get more of the same thing, perhaps offering, maybe some differences, but in a small place like WA, then those entrepreneurial people that have created that inevitably are also competitive. So how do you balance that competitive nature with ecosystem building and collaboration? The second question is completely different, which is perhaps if you could just talk a little bit more about the Kauffman Foundation in the sense of when you think about philanthropy, how that connects to entrepreneurship, because a lot of the time you think philanthropy and it's maybe arts or it's social causes like education or homelessness and things like that. We've got a few family offices here in WA that are in the early stages of thinking philanthropically towards entrepreneurship, but at the end of the day, entrepreneurship is also profit making. So how does, what drives the Kauffman mindset, I suppose? Yep.
Yeah, thank you for that. So on the first, just a question on the first. So let's say the competition's there and there's 4 accelerators or something. Is the issue that there are now 4 accelerators and
Well, they're competing to get
they're just competing to get the people.
The same funding or the same entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Programs.
Yeah. And that's not, it's not necessarily fragmentation. I was going to use that word, but that's the entrepreneurial dilemma, isn't it? Right? And so it then becomes, is there something entrepreneurially, that those four, bless you, that those four could do uniquely together to then give back to community, to then create something else as a whole that provides value versus competing each other and then competing each other's business models. And that could be, is it diversifying what they're doing acceleration-wise into other sectors other than entrepreneurship, right? Because we're starting to see some accelerators in other parts of the world that are actually into education and other types of things. But it's sort of like that innovation mindset has to be there, because you're right, and I was talking earlier about, we were talking about co-working, because I used to work for Impact Hub, which is a global organization of impact hubs, and there's co-working is the same type of thing. So sometimes it's also looking at what's the culture of each accelerator. Is there something that's unique to each one that attracts, so you're not pulling away from each other, right? That would be up to the accelerator leads to probably get in the same room and figure that out. But it's a dilemma.
Whether it's co-working or
Same thing.
networks, it's the same.
Right. Right. You get to a point where you have, for lack of a better word, saturation, and then go. But that's where the innovation part comes in, to say, okay, but what is next? What are the trends? What's the data showing? What should we be next? And do we evolve our models? That's one thing. So on entrepreneurship, we're the only foundation in the United States that has a full programmatic budget for entrepreneurship, the way we're doing. And it's because of the way Mr. Kauffman, the donor intent that he said. So that part's unique. What we're trying to do, and we've created an organization, we helped start up an organization called Entrepreneur Funders Network in the US. It was now spun out to be its own nonprofit, to bring all of the foundations that are funding some type of entrepreneurship together to talk about and to try to come up, what are there common ways we could fund together or learn together? Because the other foundations that don't have these big budgets for entrepreneurship like we do are trying to figure out, well, how can we play in there differently? How we do it, since entrepreneurship is for profit, as a foundation, we have to do our grant making to organizations who are in turn helping entrepreneurs. We cannot we can't give the grant money directly to. So we have to find creative ways. One of the creative ways that we've come up with is in our capital access work, where we've taken grant money and put it into an intermediary, a donor advised fund, who then funds the entrepreneurial efforts, right? But those are the type of things that for philanthropy to just think differently on. Help me out, did I answer either question? No, seriously. Yeah, well, that's normally the thing that I get, so that's why I'm asking. Was it all right? Yeah. Okay. No, I'm just be honest.
Yeah. No, and I think that
I have no ego doing this. So don't worry about it. None. Oh, that's great. It's fine. No.
We'll just grab another question, but I think the idea of the index is so we can measure the impact of everything that's happening and then direct more resources into the stuff that's working. So I think that's, by getting philanthropists in WA on board to be able to then direct, and government as well, by having a clear map of what's happening, what's working, who's doing what. Because 5 years ago wouldn't have been a problem, but now it's like there's, a lot of the people in the room are running accelerators, so how do we grow that? But my thing's grow the whole pie for more to happen.
We have a question online as well.
Oh, I love it.
Yep, what was the online question?
I feel like a talk show host now. We have a caller calling in.
So it's from Rebecca Davidson, who I believe works at Jetsu. So her question is that in the vast state, we are endeavouring to build a rich network that spans the distance, but there is a real challenge in getting some sort of visibility on the ground in many regions in order to support people at the local level. I wonder if you can talk to this a little more.
Yeah, we have that in rural America. And I think the key is, we were talking a little bit about this yesterday, is that, are you creating, what's the purpose of doing the endeavor? Is it because we believe that in those areas they need X, Y, or Z? Or have we listened to truly get what they really want? And is it giving resources to them to build what they want on their own? Or is it another organization coming in and saying, hey, this is what you need? Because sometimes it's the localization. It's sort of like what we did with these SHIP communities. We said, build it on your own. We can't tell you, do it naturally. From that perspective, one of the things that we've done in the US for our largest program is called, our longest standing program is called Fast Track. It's entrepreneur learning. So it's taught in 120 odd cities. And it's growth and startup and growth venture training for entrepreneurs. There's an online feature to that, which we used to charge for. We no longer charge for it because we want to give access, democratize access to people in communities that cannot get to one of the 120 locations to be taught the course. So it's trying to think through what are the things that the resources that can be given to folks that are, one, tailored to them, and two, might be able to be accessed with easier access so they don't feel the pressure of having to travel to a larger location or what have you.
Can I just add something to that? Is it okay? Thank you. Thanks, Phil. Just from a local perspective as well, this might help the person that asked the question. So Phil talked about the Million Cups program in the US, and that actually has a global brand called Startup Huddle. Yep. So we started the first Startup Huddle in Australia in Mandurah 5 years ago, just coming up for 5 years ago, and it definitely has been a mission of ours to help to establish more of those grassroots type of programs that are really based on collaboration, not competition. And we feel that it will work particularly well in regional areas because it gives a lot of people access to something that's free. It's all about the ecosystem, building the ecosystem, but it's at that kind of grassroots with the bottom-up type of impact. So I just wanted to let people know, if you are in a regional area and you're interested in that program, please let me know. I'm a global mentor for the program. I'd be happy to speak to anyone because it is a mission of mine to get more in Australia. Now that Gen Australia is a lot more active, Global Entrepreneurship Network Australia, it has become a focus and one of our goals as well.
Yeah. And another way that philanthropy can help on that, so if we take this Startup Huddle, the version of the 1 Million Cups that we do, it's all volunteer-led. So it's 130 cities across the United States. We supply the cups, the t-shirt, the coffee, the branding, the standards, and all of that. There's 4,500 events a year, if you take every week. Run in communities of 5 people come a week every Wednesday morning to 200. But there's a volunteer organizer who is doing that and they're so proud because they take their community to art. So if we're thinking about other regions and trying to reach other regions, empowering them to create on their own and create that weekly experience on their own, sometimes it really, I wouldn't say it's all they're looking for, but that it helps them be seen and be heard. So, thank you.
Hey, go Phil. Josh from Venture.
Hello.
Just wanted to get a perspective on. Granted that Australian and American political systems are very different, but have you seen? And I liked this ecosystem building in terms of it's like helping us help ourselves. But have you had any experience of seeing any political levers being pulled that have had a very big effect on the ecosystem and something that we could potentially see happen here?
No, thanks for that. One of the things that we. Two things. One of the things that we created, you can go online and look at it, it's called America's New Business Plan. What it is, it's from a policy perspective, as research informed us on policy. We said there's no single voice in government rallying for entrepreneurship in the US. So what we did, we went to DC and we hired a consultant in DC that listened to both sides, both parties, Senate Entrepreneurship Committee, House Entrepreneurship Committee. What works? What policymakers need that will help you in communities? So there's 4 parts to this plan. It's access to opportunity, access to knowledge, access to funding, and access to support. And under each pillar is a series of recommendations that policymakers can do in their states or in their cities in order to change conditions for entrepreneurship. So far, I believe we've had 27 things run through legislatures in cities advocated by the organizations in those states. But luckily, the ecosystems and the word ecosystems and entrepreneurship is now being spoken at government, even federal levels now. That first entrepreneurship summit that we did, when we had the 450 people, we had the United States Department of Commerce and Economic Development Agency come, and they came. And if we take it now 6 years later, through all the different government funding that was created, over $2 billion worth of funding from the United States Department of Commerce that's coming out to help entrepreneurial communities throughout the United States we're flattered by this, but they've attributed to this playbook and coming to that summit. And I mean, you couldn't ask for any more attribution than that, but it's happening. It's polling well. Ecosystems, the word ecosystems is actually polling, continues to poll well in the United States, which is fantastic. Entrepreneurship is a little different. Some folks in government like the word, some won't touch it because they don't believe they can get votes out of it. I mean, that's been said. No, it's a tough word. You can't spell it. I misspell it. I say all that types of sometimes. But it's one of those intimidating words too. It can keep people out. Innovation can keep, well, that's not for me, that's for the rich people or what have you. But, and we're seeing other funding programs, the SSBCI, which is State Small Business Credit Initiative, is another path of funding that's flowing through the government into cities that are going to state-led organizations that are bringing ecosystems together. In Missouri, it's Missouri Technology Corporation is the one that's hurting everyone in the state around technology clusters, and that's all coming from government money, so it's happening. Is that helpful?
Yes.
Helpful? Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, 2 more questions.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you so much. I apologise if I was like a nodding dog in the audience. I was like agreeing with everything you were saying. It was phenomenal. Just a quick question. Obviously, I work with like young people all the time behind me, and thinking about what you said about urgency within the state and then the flatlining of entrepreneurship and kind of new enterprise. We're seeing a lot of fear around the introduction of AI technology and how that's going to change the future of work for our young people. We're hosting like generative AI hackathons with Microsoft, and there's a lot of hunger to learn about this technology and how we can use it. In your experience in the US, I know there's a lot of startups coming out in this kind of industry. Do you think the WA could use that as almost like an urgency factor for our young people to generate a new kind of startup innovation space?
In 2 ways, yes. In one way, I think industry continues to create things that are going to make it harder for humans to be included in the prosperity. AI is going to displace people. It's going to make it harder for those that don't have tools, internet access, whatever it may be. It's going to exacerbate that. It's going to leave other people behind. It's also going to do the amazing stuff that it can do, right? I think it's interesting when the head of Google and others come out and say, ooh, we got to watch out about AI. There's a reason why they're saying that, right? And so I think doing it in a way, going back to those principles and making sure who's not in the room, who needs to learn about AI, how do we make it understandable? It's another term, artificial intelligence. What does that mean? So the language is important. But doing it in a way where the language is right, and the inclusion is right, and everything could end up being a model that can be shared, because that's what's being talked about in the US, that range of this is fantastic and everything else, and it's needed and it's the way, well, we know it's going that way, to, oh my goodness, this is scary. And here comes the next displacement model. It's just the evolution of it. I mean, go back to that airline days. You know, everything was paper tickets. And then the scanners happened, and then the wages changed, and the wages went to B-scale wages, and then they went to 32 hours versus 40, and then the benefits got cut, and all that. So people have this in their mind, oh my goodness, is this gonna happen again to a greater degree? So I think that the handling of it and doing of it with excitement that you have is fantastic. It's thinking about all of those different things, and whether it's hackathons, and maybe could part of the hackathons be how to hack inclusion in AI or something like that, right? And make it fun from that perspective to get people, right? To get people thinking about from that perspective. That would be exciting. I think we had one more. Yeah. I have to ask, was that helpful or did I go on a tangent? That was good, okay. All right, because I go on tangents.
Why not really? Hi, I'm Kylie. I am one of the Meshpoints stewards, but I also run Impact Seed, which is a social impact kind of focused intermediary. But my question is actually, and you started to touch on it in the last question, around, like, we talk a lot here about building the innovation ecosystem, perhaps as opposed to building the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And I just wondered, like, if you make that distinction, if that, you know, kind of interplays with any of the principles that you talked about, or if it's not really a distinction.
No, that's a good one. Yeah, because I don't know if even the word innovation was on any of on the slides, and it's purposeful because it's entrepreneurship for all. Are you a maker? Are you a dreamer? Are you a doer? Are you a gig? Well, it's entrepreneurship for all. How do you make an effective entrepreneurial ecosystem for all of that versus sector specific? It's harder. Well, it takes a lot more time. Who's not in the room? How do you do this right? Or don't give up necessarily on the innovation sectors and doing it, but is it innovating in what? Is it innovating broader? Innovation, that word leans tech, right? It always does. And then it leans, in the US, male. And then it leads all these different, which is why 75% of all venture capital in the United States goes to 5 cities, where most of the technology is done. 75%, 5 geographic locations. Only 2% of venture capital in the US goes to women-led firms. You cannot justify that, right? So that's one of the reasons why we go broader than innovation, because it's a chance for anyone that has that dream and wants to make it a reality. That's what Mr. Kauffman wanted us to do.
Cool, so everyone, if you can join me in thanking Philip.
What a timekeeper you are,
Yeah,
right?
Right on time.
Glad there wasn't another question. We would have pulled off stage.
Clap you off. I think, thanks so much for your insights, and it's a great opportunity to share, and also we filmed it, so share with the West Australian ecosystem of now, over 100 organisations that are working in this space. Thanks everyone for coming during good weather and school holidays as well. And a big thank you to Nate, Olivia and Lauren, because like a week and a half ago, this stuff wasn't happening. This event wasn't happening, and I was like, oh, we can do that, right, in a week and a half. Thanks a lot, guys, for helping pull everything together. Really appreciate everyone being here and the work you're doing. And now we've got probably the next big thing on the calendar is West Tech Fest in December. So looking forward to that. But thank you.
Thanks, everybody.